They say the world is ruled by elites. That word has been bent out of shape. When people spit elite, they rarely mean oligarchs or generals. They mean the thinking class. The rich are envied, but thinkers are generally resented. Here's the part that most miss. Intellect is power. It's not the kind that generally rules openly, but the kind that designs the world that the rulers actually live in. It builds the architecture of stability, language and law, money and measurement, logistics and code. It defines what freedom, justice, and truth even mean, and then writes the procedures that distribute foods, that settle bets, that price risk, and that route electricity. In a real sense, intellect doesn't just interpret the world, it manufactures the operating system. That's precisely why it's feared. Intellect can overwhelm other powers. It can replace an entire economy, a central bank model, a trading algorithm. It can invent new currencies and markets. Look at cryptography, cryptocurrency, distributed ledgers. Or it can create technologies that render yesterday's force obsolete. The panic around AI, it's not part of a fear of metal, it's a fear of mind. Intelligence is invisible, it is faster than us, and it is no longer pretending to wait for permission. But let's be consistent. If intellect can unmake, it also makes. The same thinking that can crash a currency also designed clearinghouses so that trades clear. The same code that threatens jobs also keeps aircraft safely apart and insulin cold across continents. Intellect is not the havoc, it's the infrastructure. Societies turn on it when anxiety outpaces understanding, not because thinking is destructive by nature, but because it accelerates beyond what power can actually manage. So, two errors creep in. First, we conflate thinkers with elites, when the real elites are the gatekeepers who decide which ideas get oxygen, funding, distribution, legitimacy. We mistake intellect for contempt. This is the second mistake, because many first met intellect as humiliation. That red pen, the correction, the class that made us feel small. Resentment sticks, reflection does not. So across eras, the reflex repeats. Mock the expert, sneer at book learning, punish the questioner. Left, right, sacred, secular, it doesn't matter. Every system that fears its own reflection eventually declares a quiet war on thought. This isn't a story about intellect versus ignorance. It's a story about power versus interpretation, about who gets to decide what reality means and which meanings are allowed to live. And, as always, the first casualty is the questioner. Every age invents its own elites. Once the word meant excellence. Now it means arrogance. It's a category shift that says more about envy than it does about actual power. You know, most people's first memory of intellect isn't wonder, it's correction. It's the teacher's red pen, the classmate who knew the answer, the humiliation of not knowing. That sting lingers, and it colors every later encounter with intellect, the professor, the policymaker, the scientist, anyone whose knowledge implies your ignorance. Psychologists call this status anxiety. It's when a skill or status feels unattainable, so we ridicule it to protect our pride, our self-image. The populist instinct is simply the political weaponization of that reflex. The crowd is told that the elites, meaning intellectuals, look down on them. The line works because it flatters pain, it turns embarrassment into anger, and that anger turns it into belonging. Historian Richard Hofstadter noticed this decades ago. In Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, a 1963 book, he wrote that every populist movement in the United States, left or right, defined virtue as plain sense and intellect as decadence. Across cultures, the same logic holds. Whenever people feel outpaced by complexity, they punish those who are able to navigate it. Sociologist Christopher Lasch refined the diagnosis. The modern elite, he said, no longer meant a landed class, but a cognitive one. People who live by manipulating information rather than producing goods. They became visible, not because they ruled, but because they spoke a language others were unable to translate. And yet, intellect's power remains misunderstood. It doesn't dominate through command, it dominates through design, through discourse. It builds systems so indispensable that they disappear into daily life. When those systems accelerate, finance, medicine, technology, fear follows. People don't hate experts because they're useless. They hate them because they suspect they are indispensable. And the fear, it metastasizes online. Algorithms flatten nuance into outrage, and the crowd mistakes visibility for arrogance. The scientist, the writer, the coder, all become elites, symbols of some invisible conspiracy of competence. The irony is exquisite. The very intellect that built the platforms enabling populist revolt becomes the scapegoat of its own invention. We don't resent intellect because it's wrong. We resent it because it reminds us that power without understanding is borrowed power. And borrowed power is always afraid of the debt being called in. Every tyranny begins the same way. It kills the questioners first. Not the rebels, the readers. Not the generals, the teachers. Not the fighters, the thinkers. Because every regime knows a secret. Before you can control people, you must control meaning. And meaning begins with those who can ask why. History, it keeps a perfect record of this reflex. Cambodia, 1975, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge emptied the cities, declared it year zero, and executed anyone with glasses or ink stains on their finger. Proof, they said, of bourgeois contamination. The regime didn't fear rebellion, it feared reflection. Poland, 1940, in the Katyn Forest, Stalin's NKVD executed over 20,000 officers, priests, and professors in collaboration with the Nazis. This was the nation's very nervous system. China, 1966, Mao's Red Guards dragged teachers through the streets, beating them with their own textbooks, chanting, "Better dead than expert." Germany, 1933, Nazi students piled philosophy and poetry on to bonfires. The book burnings weren't symbolic, they were strategic. Kill the vocabulary, and no one can name the crime. They were different flags, but they were the same impulse. Left, right, sacred, secular, it doesn't matter. Every ideology that fears losing control begins by erasing complexity, because complexity forces choice, and choice dilutes obedience. Playwright and dissident Václav Havel called it the power of the powerless, the quiet defiance of thinking for oneself. He warned that totalitarianism doesn't fear opposition, it fears the independent mind. Authoritarians understand what democracies often forget. Intellect, it doesn't need to fight tyranny to defeat it. It only needs to make it obsolete. A new technology, a new idea, a new vocabulary. That's all it takes to render yesterday's force, yesterday's might, yesterday's power ridiculous. That's why power always strikes first. It can jail a body or silence a press, but it can't survive a population that remembers how to think. Intellect is civilization's greatest stabilizer and its most efficient saboteur. It builds order, but it can also think the order out of existence. The same clarity that cures diseases can design new weapons. The same logic that governs justice can justify atrocity. The mind that discovers truth can just as easily rationalize power. Philosopher Martin Heidegger wrapped fascism in metaphysics. Soviet ideologues produced flawless Marxist logic for purges that left no one to read them. Cold War physicists gave the world both nuclear energy and the bomb that could end that very world. But the record, it isn't only complicity, it's conscience. Hannah Arendt exposed the banality of evil, proving that thought itself can be resistance. Simone Weil wrote that attention, not faith, was the truest form of prayer, and Bertrand Russell called doubt a civic virtue. Across centuries, Confucian scholar officials served as moral ballast against emperors drunk on power. Ibn Khaldun warned that dynasties decay when intellect retreats from politics. Intellect gives us stability, law, mathematics, logistics, but it also breeds restlessness. It refines systems until they tremble under their own power, their own precision. That's what makes it both feared and indispensable. It builds faster than power can even govern. So today, the pattern repeats at machine speed. Algorithms that stabilize markets can crash those same markets in seconds. AI that diagnoses illnesses can destabilize industries overnight. Once again, intellect is racing ahead, dragging politics and ethics behind it like old software struggling to load. We fear intellect, not because it destroys order, but because it moves beyond it. Yet, every leap it makes, electricity, antibiotics, code, it reaffirms the same truth that the mind's disruptions are not chaos, they are civilization renewing itself. So, the danger isn't too much thinking. It's the moment that we decide we've thought enough. Intellect invents, power selects. Throughout history, thinkers have generated worlds, but patrons have decided which of those worlds actually get built. The Medici funded humanism to legitimize their banking dynasty. The Soviets paid for socialist realism to make tyranny look virtuous. The Rockefeller Foundation financed Cold War art that made freedom feel modern. Today, tech billionaires could bankroll AI ethics that never ever question who owns the data that they're using. So, as Antonio Gramsci warned, the ruling class not only controls production, but the production of ideas. The mind supplies the architecture, but money chooses the design. And that's the real structure of elite power. Intellectuals rarely rule. Maybe they draft the blueprints, but it's capital and might that decide which ones become the skyline. So power, it needs intellect for legitimacy. The philosopher's logic, the engineer's math, the artist's myth. But once the scaffolding is up, the thinkers are sent home. And yet the inverse also holds. When intellect outgrows its sponsor, it is declared dangerous. So Socrates drinks the hemlock, Galileo is silenced. In our century, whistleblowers and researchers meet quieter fates. Funding pulled, visas revoked, reputations unmade. The elites, most people imagine, professors, scientists, writers, are usually employees of real power, not authors of it. So they work inside the structures they built, often with less freedom than those outside mocking them. The populist sleight of hand is perfect. Blame the visible intellect for the invisible hand that pays it. The true elite is the gatekeeper, the one who decides which ideas get oxygen and which are doomed to suffocate in obscurity. When money and intellect align, civilization advances, but when they diverge, one tries to buy silence and the other simply learns to whisper. That's when the war on thought begins in earnest, when the architects start building without permission. Intellect isn't rebellion, it's infrastructure. Every bridge, every court, every algorithm began as an act of thought. Someone asking, how does this stay standing? When societies collapse, it's rarely because they run out of strength or money. They collapse because they stop maintaining their thinking. Civilization is a machine of ideas. Law converts morality into policy. Science converts curiosity into survival. Philosophy converts chaos into meaning. When that machinery runs too fast, we call it disruption, but when it stops, we call it decay. Either way, the mind is the maintenance crew. That's why every age that scorns its thinkers begins to creak. Rome mocked its engineers before its aqueducts cracked. Europe laughed at scientists until the plague reminded it who kept the water clean. Today, we sneer at experts while the systems they designed quietly hold up our lives. Grids, networks, markets, medicine, all are invisible until they fall. Thinking is what keeps failure delayed. Not passion, not slogans, maintenance. The danger now, it isn't ignorance, it's intellectual disrepair. We live inside structures so complex that almost no one understands them, yet everyone feels entitled to sabotage the architects. That tension between dependence and contempt, that is what hollows civilizations out from within. So intellect's role isn't to rule, it's to steady, to inspect the wiring of our beliefs, to tighten the bolts of our logic and replace the corroded myths that hold institutions together. It's less glamorous than revolution. It's more like upkeep. But neglect it long enough and the roof caves in. So, if rebellion is dramatic, maintenance is moral. To think clearly, consistently, even privately, is not vanity, it's civic hygiene. And that's where the next section begins. The discipline of keeping the mind in a good state of repair. The habits that make intellect a defense instead of simply a decoration. Intellect isn't talent, it's maintenance. These are not virtues. They're defensive technologies for minds that refuse to be managed from outside. So, the first tip, practice cognitive counter-surveillance. Audit your own persuasion. Notice which moods or media shift your opinions, and then ask why. The mind that monitors its inputs can't be quietly rewritten. Self-awareness is the first encryption key. Second, run a private opposition party. Keep a notebook where every belief faces its strongest counter-arguments and update that book monthly. Contradiction is camouflage, but unpredictability is independence. This is red teaming for the self, thinking that checks its own propaganda. Third, I want you to inoculate with controlled exposure. Study the rhetoric of manipulation the same way that immunologists study viruses. Read propaganda on purpose and dissect its grammar, not just its arguments, even the grammar itself. Immunity, it isn't ignorance, it's familiarity without infection. Fourth, I want you to engineer your inputs, live deliberately, design information the same way that athletes design nutrition. One clean protein, e.g. primary sources, one spice, e.g. opposition voices, and one fast a week. No screens, just thought. Attention is metabolism, so feed it intentionally for the best results. 5, I want you to use silence as a weapon. We've discussed this before. Delay your response in every heated exchange. Most manipulation relies on speed, but stillness, it breaks that script. The pause is tactical. It reclaims authorship of the next sentence. Number 6, I want you to map systems, not events. Events entertain, but systems explain. Train yourself to trace incentives, who funds, who filters, who benefits. Narrative, it belongs to those who see the feedback loop, not simply the headline. Run these like maintenance cycles. They keep intellect from becoming infrastructure for someone else's agenda. Reflection, practice daily, turns thought into leverage. The rules to remember here are simple. First, the unexamined opinion serves whoever shouts loudest. Second, attention is a currency, so guard it like the last stable one. And third, every mind is a territory. If you don't patrol its borders, someone else is going to invade. Every civilization falls the same way. Not when it runs out of wealth or weapons, but when it stops maintaining its thinking. When the mind grows lazy, power fills the vacuum. When intellect retreats, superstition steps forward. When the questioners go quiet, the answers become law. We call it chaos when intellect breaks our systems, but that's not chaos. That's the mind doing what it's built to do, rebalancing the architecture before collapse. Every breakthrough that saved us began as a disruption in the microscope, the novel, the internet. We survived not by silencing thought, but by listening to what made us uncomfortable. But intellect is patient. It waits. It rewires. It outlives every regime that tries to muzzle it. You can jail thinkers, you can burn books and throttle data, you can drown discourse in noise, but eventually the same thing happens. Someone, somewhere, begins to wonder again. And that's how the war on thought always ends. Not with a surrender, but with a question whispered in the dark. Most will fear intellect for what it can destroy, but you'll remember what it protects. The wiring, the balance, the fragile order beneath all noise. Because in the end, every empire stands on thought, and only thought keeps it standing.